Last week, my kids were both like they actually like my receivers. Yeah. There's something going on.
So you actually.
I don't want them to be Tom.
Tom, whenever you're ready.
I called the Board of Committee the whole meeting at 6:31 p.m. in the boardroom of Fort Parker Forest High School and at the roll calls.
Mr. Briskin,
Here.
Dr. Mahara. Here, Mr. Arkin,
Here.
Ms. Williams Lee.
Here.
Mr. Gibson is here, Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Kozowski.
Here. I moved to enter closed session for purpose of discussing the employment compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel of the district and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employer or against legal counsel of the district to determine its validity. However, meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. And collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees.
Second.
And roll call please.
Dr. Mahara.
Yes.
Mr. Arkin,
Yes.
Ms. Williams Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Briskin,
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
And Mr. Kozowski.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay.
The gavel.
Do we need a gavel?
We have a gavel.
We have a gavel. They've never let me use it.
I want to be clear, this is a pretty unruly bunch.
I know, I'm looking at the crowd. Okay,
They're all on the back row too.
so we are resuming open session. And our first order of business is public comments. Lisa?
We have no public comments in person via Zoom, but I do have one to be ready to make.
Is there anyone here who would like to make public comments that didn't sign up? Okay. We shall then move to approval of the minutes. So I move to approve September 7, 2023 committee of the whole minutes as presented. Are there any corrections or adjustments that need to be made?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? No. The ayes have it. And our next segment is construction.
Okay, we have two instructional items for this evening. The first is our annual course proposals. These are changes to our academic catalog to be implemented next school year. It's done so at this time of year, every year, to help students to prepare the academic catalog so that we can begin the course registration process, which begins in November. So I will turn it over to Dr. Fiorenzo.
Good evening. Tonight is Dr. Johnson, but I'm presenting the course proposals for the 24-25 school year for discussion. As outlined in the board memo, these proposals include course additions, revisions, and deletions across all 8 divisions. I'd like to draw your attention to just a few important changes. In English, in response to our ongoing efforts to ensure that all of our students see themselves in our curriculum, a new Asian American Voices course is being proposed. In both English and history, we're proposing a revision to our World Studies Immersion History and English courses, to English Accelerate and World History Accelerate to more closely match the courses that these two classes are aligned to, as well as to minimize the stigma that can come along with intervention courses. In history, we are also proposing the addition of the AP African American Studies course, which is currently being piloted. In math, we are moving into year 2 of the integrated math curriculum that was approved by the board last year, proposing the addition of Math 2, Math 2 Block Accelerate, Math 2A, and Math 2 Extended. Along with these additions is also the proposal to add a data science course. Similarly, in science, we're moving into year 2 of changes to that scope and sequence that was also previously approved by the Board of Education by proposing the addition of an AP research class, Chemistry 2, and Physics 2. And finally, in world languages, we are proposing the addition of an ELL study skills and support course to move to more strategically support our distinct needs of ELL students, in addition to the various revisions and deletions. Are there questions?
A very small question, and I'm just curious with the revised novel into film, that it seems like it's being strictly limited to film as in full-length movies, and I wonder sort of whether there was, when this was being developed, whether there was any conversation about television series that would so empty. I'm just wondering whether this is like slightly narrow and you might want to give the teacher a little more. But
Sure.
I don't know to the teachers, I wondered about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So really the change is so that that course is NCAA approved. The NCAA would not approve the course titled novels into film. So the division head did some inquiry, and as a result, other schools call it the visual word. So we're shifting to that. And I do believe they may be, you check and make sure those division hasn't. Wait,
Eric is on.
very good, Erica. Hi, Erica. If you have anything else to add, Erica, jump in. We see you there.
No, you accurately answered that question, but I'm here to answer any others that they need. Hi, everybody.
Thank you. There's Dr. Fry as well. Beautiful.
Hi, just wanted to add, I had made a question in advance for discussion and just sort of understanding how, with the integrated math and how we're going the direction of schools are, because I would say when I read it, I thought, well, how do you know what math might state it, right? When you look at it, but my question was really around the core titles and terminology, obviously they're very accustomed to the typical geometry or trig or calculus or et cetera.
Yes, those are great questions. Dr. Fry, would you like to jump in?
I actually had trouble hearing the question. Can it be repeated? Or can you say it, Lori?
Oh, sure, I'll be happy to repeat it. My question is really with the title changes on the math classes as we're going in this new direction. I had submitted a question saying, would that be with the naming, the nomenclature, be more challenging, given the move from what we're typically accustomed to with algebra, trig, calculus to, just the general math 1, math 2 kind of descriptions.
Yeah, I don't suspect it will be more challenging. The National Council of Teacher Mathematics moved to the Common Core State Standards over a decade ago, which highly recommended the move to integrated math. So math 1, math 2, and math 3 is actually being used in various schools around the country and has been for a decade. And international students would also be using courses with similar titles. So I think that the colleges are probably not worried so much about the math 1, math 2, and math 3, but the math that students would take after that is probably what they're looking for. And one of the reasons we moved to the integrated platform is so that all kids would get up to what comes after math 3. So that would be on their transcript, hopefully, when they enter college.
Great, it's good to know that I didn't understand it's part of the standard. So when you talk about it, no matter where it's coming from, it would be the same. It's part of the Common Core standards.
Other questions? My question is more of confusion of, you had mentioned the math curriculum, you said we approved. So are we double approving things? And how does it kind of fit together?
Right.
And it would, first of all, I think it would be helpful to see it fit together in terms of what we have previously seen, where this is the scope and now here's the detail.
Sure. So in the current course catalog and in course catalogs moving forward, the graphic for the entire scope and sequence of math is in that catalog and will continue to be in that catalog. So what was approved was the actual scope and sequence. What is approved over the course of time and is outlined in that process is every year we are rolling up. So we started with math 1, implementing that this year. So each year we will have to come to you with the actual courses that are ready with the course description, with actual curriculum to be implemented for that final stamp of approval. So the scope and sequence was approved, but the actual course with course description, prerequisites and such need to come before the board as well.
And so that process will take how many years? I realize to complete the transformation, recognizing there's constant change, that process will take how long?
The last year that we had implemented will be 25, 26. That's correct, right, Julie? So make sure.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Yep.
Next up under instruction is our school safety and student intervention presentation. Here for that conversation is Ms. Linda Parker. This report you will see listed has 3 others included on this. Who have all been part of the development of the same legacy.
And just the course that we just went through will be presented in 2 weeks for vote.
Absolutely, and that's a good segue. This presentation is at committee for discussion and information. It is not for any eventual pending vote. Yeah. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. For the sake of this meeting here, you were sent the original presentation that was actually done on Tuesday at Community Council, but I'm not going to go through every slide just for time's sake, but you can ask questions if you need to. This presentation and this report is actually in response to April 12th, which was the meeting we had on safety with the community and with students and with our administration in regards to safety concerns. And then if you recall, there were questions that were received from all of the individuals who were in that space. We sent out information on each of those questions, but then we talked a little bit about how we would come back in the fall and talk about things that we have accomplished as a result of the questions that we have. So that is what the purpose of this slide that I have this evening will show you. So in today's presentation, we're looking at where we were, where we're going, and then how we're going to get there. And we'll look at a little bit of data to do with it. I realized after actually that I did this presentation with Community Council, I'm not exactly sure why when we talk safety, we automatically pair it with behavior. So that's one thing that's on my mind now that I'm thinking about, like, I don't know that there's an absolute parallel between safety and discipline. I'm going to stop doing that. So I'm going to grow this a little bit to just show us how safety can relate to other areas within our building, but you're going to see some discipline data in this one as we're going through it. You probably can't see it well on the screen, but if you're looking at your own, this is just a chart that shows the count of incidents that happened from last school year. So you're just looking at the number of incidents that occurred, which are single incidents based off of occurrences within the school. One of the things the reasons why we're showing you this is just so that you could get an idea of the categories within our BEP where incidents fall. Because when we think safety, oftentimes one of the narratives that have come out in terms of like fights every day in the building, I wanted to show exactly where things are falling with respect to that. And then in order to put this in a safety context, we're looking at how these incidents play out in terms of safety in regards to students as individuals and then students as a whole in terms of our school. And so that is what you see on the next slide. The only purpose that you see separated here, when it says impact on others, we're considering what the impact was of a student or other students who were not involved in the incidents, how they were perceiving or receiving possible things. And then on the other side, you see safety impacts on the individual. When you look at things like vaping and smoking, we know that that has effects on the individual doing them. That's not to take away from like secondhand smoke, but it's to say that for the most part, it's harm to self versus harm to others. And what we noticed and what I pointed out is that we have larger incidents of a larger impact on self than we do on school at large when you look at the numbers that are just in those incidents. And know that of the chart that you saw before this is literally just pulling out those things that we thought might have a correlation to safety. So this is not every single one of those incidents that you saw on the other side that just probably may fall with regards to safety for others and safety on students. So where are we going and how will we get there? Takes a look at what type of things have we done as a building to actually enhance our safety protocols. And then what are the supports in place for students in order to help when we see that there are calls for support needs. The things you see here are the things that our campus safety team led by Cindy Guerra have been putting in place.
to make sure that students and others, adults in the building are aware of the safety, processes that and protocols that we put in place, but then also to give you an idea of, those things as well. The safety tip of the week in the weekly bulletin, I know that I gave Cindy Guerra a charge to make sure we're promoting what's happening around safety as much as we promote everything else. Why do I say that? I think in the absence of hearing about the things that are happening around safety, there's an assumption sometimes that it's not happening. And so I'm finding ways to make sure we're giving students tips on how they can be safe in our environment, how others can help us to do more safety oriented things within the building, but putting it more in the forefront of people's attention. And the final two slides are in response to, so when we see incidents that are happening, how are we servicing our student body in terms of this? And this is a PDF, so you won't be able to see this, but just so you know on the copy, no, they probably have PDF too. One of the things that's embedded in here that's also on our website are the list of all of our social work groups that have been provided this year by our school social workers that allow students to opt in to get assistance where they need it. One of the things I was very clear on telling community council was when you think about a thing like vaping, there's no suspending vaping out of a student. Like vaping is an addiction along with it's because of the nicotine. And so we have in place an assessment team that joins us from an outside organization that actually runs assessments on our students to determine what the need might be for further treatment. And that is sometimes a call that's made by parents and that's declined because they don't want their student to have to experience anything like that. And yet the addiction continues on, like having to come to school and use your vape while you're at school is a significant concern, but it's not something we're going to discipline out. And so we have something like that where we have services for it, it is an opt-in based off of what our parents would like to take advantage of. But I listed here just some of the other things that are used to help support students and their families when concerns are arising on these two pages. And then I have my question slide. Yeah.
I can start. I have two questions. So one is aside from the presentation that was sent to us, and it's just about the title of the slide. In fact, it's the total number of individual infractions requiring the intervention, and then follows a racialized breakdown. And I'm wondering whether requiring should be changed to something like eliciting the intervention, because my thinking here is that we know that the same behavior done by students of different racial groups is perceived differently, right? And so I just wonder whether having the word requiring kind of like slants this in a certain way. That's not really a question. I just want to raise it as something to consider. Maybe as a framework. My question is about the sexual assault, non-consensual touch elements here. And this is coming out of the community council meeting I went to last year, where that was the main concern of the students who attended. And I guess my question is a reporting question, right? Because these incidents are the ones that make it to the beat, right?
Correct.
And sexual harassment, sexual assault, well, all of that often does not, there's so much taboo about it, right? And all of it, much of it doesn't make it to a reporting level. And I'm wondering whether we have processes in place for anonymized collection of that data. I don't know. And so I just feel like it's hard to address something if it's something that can't be spoken.
Very true. And that is something that comes up quite a bit. And an added concern that comes up is the number of things that happen that are not on campus. And then the reporting of that, or the non-reporting, or the friend reporting that then gets turned down in terms of actually taking it as a Title IX. concerns. So we do in our literature on the web, in their handbooks, around the school through posters, we post on how you can report a sexual assault, sexual harassment, but as you said, it's just the mere getting out. So with our Title IX coordinator, which is Janelle Bishop, she always speaks to having conversations with families about the reporting and to help, and oftentimes she has people turn down.
Well, that's why I'm wondering about whether there's a way, so reporting is, is stigmatizing and there's a whole set of reasons why someone might not want to report sexual harassment or assault. And I'm wondering if there's a way we can collect at least some sense of, again, like some sort of anonymized survey form or something like that. So you already have an answer to this right now. I just wanted to raise the question, something to consider with safety going forward.
Definitely. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Linda, I had the benefit of hearing a presentation with community council Tuesday night, and I thought you did a terrific job on Tuesday, as did your team. I really appreciate you guys being there and pulling all this together, community council. You went into a little greater detail Tuesday on a couple of things. And I was just going to ask you to do the same here, because I think both of these things are of interest to the community. One is it's just a small change that I think Cindy Guerra has brought about in her short time here. And you referenced it on the safety slide, and that is the sort of taking a look at traffic patterns in the hallways and in between periods, and how I think the way you talked about it Tuesday was that we're stationing security personnel in different places than maybe we had in the past, and that's made a big difference. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Some of that, and thank you very much for those kind words. If the board remembers when we were back in the spring and we actually asked for additional campus safety support members because of targeted areas within the building that needed more eyes on hotspots. We are now having been able to hire those individuals. We have a dedicated camera person now who is just on it in terms of watching the cameras, being able to dispatch campus safety to areas where students have been or were. For example, we talked about the doors before, and we don't have a person necessarily at every door all the time, but the camera person is always catching that, getting the film, we get the names, and then there's able to be follow-up on those individuals afterwards to address that situation, which is done wonders. And then our bathrooms, we specifically were looking for people to just monitor student entry and exit from those bathrooms in groups so that we can make sure that they're having safe experiences in those safe spaces. And that's been something that has been very acknowledged through the building. And then the third floor box, which anyone who's attended here, that's where everybody comes to be social during the bell passing time. There are more people there keeping students moving along, not to stop the social interaction, but to be cognizant that we have 5 minutes to get to class. And so we want to keep moving as we're moving and talking. And so that's been a great help, just putting those people in. She's been able to slowly hire and get those positions filled, but it's made a difference. And one of the things I mentioned in community council was just a comparison in terms of our first physical aggression that happened this year versus last year. Last year, August 25th was the first time we had an encounter of students having an interaction. This year, September 22nd. So it's just been a very noticeable difference within the building in terms of conduct and how it's being monitored.
And I think it's small, it sounds like a really minor change. I think when we're talking about our students' perception of whether this is a safe environment, it really is meaningful. If you are walking down the hallway between every class and it's a minefield and it's tough to navigate and it's scary, that makes you feel a certain way. And when traffic is flowing and you can get where you need to be on time, that makes you feel a completely different way. It makes you feel safer here. So it's a small change, but I think it's a really impactful. The other question I had was around I think it was kind of an epidemic last spring of kids leaving, through every one of our exits, which led to having more security guards and so on. the solution that we've arrived at of some additional security personnel, but also using video cameras, having kind of a centralized person watching camera feeds. Has that been successful in not eliminating that kids moving through all the exits, but has it minimized it? Do you still see that as a terrible problem that we're facing, or do you feel like we're in a better place?
So when I say better place, yes, there are still students leaving out the doors. Do I think it's at the same rate? I know one of my door, number 6, that my office sits on over it, has not been at the rate that I used to. And I used to be the person running with my camera to take a picture to send it. I don't have to do that anymore. But I think through the interactions we're having with kids after, it's like, how did you come and find me? Like Cindy is very good about following up and closing the loop. And so students who might come and have an adverse reaction, it's like, it's okay, you can go, I'll find you. And so they always find them and go back and has a nice conversation about, see, I told you I find you. And those students have built rapport with her as a result because she made the effort to just come and find them. And in all honesty, I tell everyone, when you are invisible, you do things that you think you were going to get away with because no one sees you. But when someone sees you, it becomes and then you get the opportunity to speak one-on-one about the why, and it makes a very big difference for students. So I can say that it has lessened, but that also means that through all of those interactions, I know I'm going to see an uptick of the reporting of those conversations being had with students, that work being had last year just because we didn't know always who they were.
Thank you.
Can I just go to on that, because I have the same questions, and I guess what would be helpful is, you're talking about it anecdotally, but when that meeting was last spring, there were some very specific measures that were pointed out, and so now it would be nice to see, because there was measures and a recommendation that we need to do something to change what we were doing. So it would be nice to have the same measures, but here's the before and here's the after. It's what you asked, but quantitative. And then the second piece, which is quasi-quantitative, is the field question. And, because at that meeting, there were adults in the building who stated, I don't feel safe. And that's obviously a great concern. And when we talk later about board goals, this is one that we have keen interest on as a board. So my question is, what are the plans that we have to assess that those words feel safe in our building?
Very good question, which came up as well on Tuesday. First and foremost, which was very interesting when I was talking to my superintendent about this. This isn't the discipline, which is why I started by saying I'm looking at how we pair discipline with safety as if that's the only measure that we do safety. And I think we have to separate it because the report you're talking about when we asked for the people was about discipline. And this was not supposed to necessarily be the discipline report. This was just an update on safety measures. And I would love to be able to get to the end of the year to actually speak to the real changes, because I have small things that have happened up to this point. But to measure everything in comparison to say last year, I won't have until, even if I do semester 1 or so as we go forward. But the biggest thing I wanted to make sure we understood in community council was coming to a common understanding of what we mean by safety. Because even in the list where I talk about safety to one and safety to all, it's different. So in some reports or in some respects, we think about it as guns, like we don't want guns in the school. We don't want to have a shooting. That's one way of thinking safety. Whereas I don't want to have disturbances in the classroom. Like if somebody throws a piece of paper or gets into it with a student, that's disturbing the whole environment and causing a safety issue. So part of what Ms. Trotsky just said was what are we measuring as our safety? And then also to that same respect, how we're defining it, what we're defining as, and I think we're going to have to, as a school, come to this common understanding. So we're saying this report is representing safety in this context. So we're answering those questions for everybody.
Just one, just going back to Tim's piece around some of the things that you're measuring. You mentioned that as you're able now to see more what's happening with students, that there's going to be more reporting, right? And there are some things we want to see go up, you know, even Mary Ann, to your point. And so have you identified those things where actually a good sign is that they're actually increasing in numbers, because that means that some of the results that you want to get are actually happening.
Correct. And so when I work with the data team who was at the community council meeting, that's what we're looking at now. Like, not just the measuring of infractions and what's an infraction. How about those restorative conversations that we're having and the mediations that we're doing in order to reverse adverse things that were happening before. So yes, that's the conversation in compiling the data now.
And I love it because more students, you know, getting out. I love seeing slide.
Yeah. It's quite fun. And they're so surprised. It's not.
Yeah, I have a question, because this isn't. I'm not understanding, I'm looking at the 11th slide on 12. And it's the one that says the total number of individual infractions required. And it's broken down by ethnically. It seems to me that there's a significant increase from school year 2022 to 2023 in each group. Demographic. So my first question would be just to gain an understanding of what you think that's about. And then my second question, which kind of ties in a little bit, is then the next slide, when we look at the interventions, the 2022 school year, and about 65 more interventions than the 2023 school year. Although the 2023 school year had more infractions. So this is not adding up.
So the intervention preventions, and what you're seeing there is a nomenclature issue that we are correcting this year. Intervention prevention, and for lack of a better word, is counterterrorism. I know that sounds horrible, but it's the things we stop from happening that would have happened if they hadn't had an intervention. And so when you see those numbers, those are 155 things that could have happened that didn't, because a dean intervened and stopped it, and then 90 other. So these are good things that have happened, but the problem was in our discipline system with collecting data, you can only enter something as a infraction. So when we were writing this to actually record the data, even though it was something we were stopping, it was going into a system that only counts things happening and calling them infractions. So yes, there are less things that were stopped according to this. I don't have specifics from them as to why we didn't stop as many things as we stopped the year before, but it is a good thing when that number is high, or these here.
Okay. And but what about the total number of infractions?
So
increase.
The slide that you're looking at is this one with the colored boxes. So know that in this count, we're counting individuals. So these are the number, like by student, or actual students having the one. And so without having recidivism data here, I can't speak to how many times a child was counted here, because I might have had as an individual 5 infractions. So I'm represented here 5 times, but I'm one kid. That's what's doing. I can't answer like, but this is really just this many students in that. But just know that this is counting any time a student was intervened with a dean in this. And so without having that in front of me, just the recidivism, I can't tell you how many actual kids this represents. Does that make sense? In terms of the actual number of kids versus the number of infractions that there were. And again, only because this wasn't meant to be discipline data, it was just meant to show students that were counted and had infractions.
Okay.
So thank you for this report, and I like a lot of the thought processes. You're your thinking around separating the topic of safety from necessarily discipline. I think that's good. And you've got some new initiatives underway, and it sounds like there's very much an interest in tracking what the data tells you about how those initiatives are having an effect or not having an effect over time. And you know, I think it's an important distinction also to follow on what Fred was saying and you were responding with, because there's numbers of incidents and then there's number of students involved in it.
Correct, correct.
And I would encourage you to look at both those things, measure them, report them out, and ideally measure them over time, even dating back to, you know, a 5-year trend. Which leads me to an email exchange that I had with Dr. Johnson back on June 14th, because at that time, the Wednesday Journal had unfortunately, I believe, misrepresented that there was, you know, more of a problem here around fights and discipline and so forth. We had initiated a response that attempted to show unique count of students with referrals for inappropriate physical contact. So we know that somewhere in your system you have this information. It'll be just a matter of your data team pulling it together and representing it. And then I'll re-forward that to you, because what I did was I took that unique count, which was a number of students with such infractions, and converted it to a percentage of the student body, because percentages are so valuable to convey context. And in doing so, it revealed that between 1.7 and 2.2% of the total student body even has any referral for inappropriate physical contact. So I'm going to re-forward this to you and encourage you to kind of use data in that way. And the last thing I'll say is, I think consistent with some of the other board remarks is, you know, I'm very much aligned to that priority of the personal sense of safety and security that every student and staff has in the building. That to me is the number one priority. But second and behind it is addressing this issue of perception. You may not have personally experienced in the building, but there's a rumor and a perception, and I think the data will help beat that back. And then, of course, there's the perception within the community because they heard something or they saw something on social media, and the data will be helpful with that as well. So I'll just quickly forward that to you.
Thank you.
Can I jump up just what you were saying, Greg, about that, and this goes back to what Tom was saying about people feeling safe in the building. I guess I just wanted to say there's two ways to look at that. And on the one hand, you want everyone to feel safe in the building, right? And on the other hand, if you look at things like, you know, the Harvard's like, you know, implicit bias tests and things like that, you know that there's a lot of cultural factors that go into whether someone feels safe when they see somebody approaching them, somebody raising their voice, you know, different different interaction modes, et cetera, so on. And so I guess I just sort of feel like, I don't know, we need to keep both of those in mind. Just because somebody doesn't feel safe doesn't mean they aren't safe, right? Is one piece of it. But also, we want people to feel safe, and maybe there are multiple routes to helping them feel safe, right? Like making sure they're actually safe and anyway. So I hope that made sense. I feel like it's
No, yeah, no, that's big. Maybe I'll think,
Yes, the ground thing, when you can all have the data and go see what a small percentage of what that actually is. I mean, I do believe that you're always going to have some element of perceptions that are really hard to change, because we've all heard all the stories throughout the past few years about doing anything all black. So it's just one of those things, this is the reality of where we are, but I do believe with the data to back up what's actually happening and being able to share and communicate that more, but hopefully help to start to spell some of this over time.
I also think that to add to that, just how a student coming home saying there was a fight today does not necessarily mean I didn't feel safe. And I don't know how much that's getting conflated as well. Like, because I mentioned I saw this does not necessarily meant I equated that to not feeling safe. I'm often wondering, how do I draw out? Was that a safety concern for you or like an annoyance? Like, oh, there you go, right?
Yeah, that I was recalling being at a community council meeting, last year, there were some students who were speaking, and one of the students actually brought up, if I will tell my parents, there's a fight, that they're all worried, like, I'm fine, right? So, but, so there is that ultimate element of how it gets interpreted. Right,
Correct.
You're,
Correct.
you know, by the parents or guardians.
Correct.
I just had one really small question, Linda. Going to your slide on the index of incident IDs. The offenses listed seem pretty clear to me, pretty straightforward. And the one that I just could use additional clarification on is gang activity and what is the criteria that designates gang activity as an incident ID, and is it a secondary designation to another existing incident ID, or I just am curious what that is.
So sometimes that is represented in terms of students saying something to someone else or representing something with a hand signal or by writing something. But typically it's if it's heard uttered from a student, like I'm in a gang, or, you know, using that to speak to somebody else that it's heard, and then it's brought to and referred to the dean.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next segment will be finance, so.
Okay, first up is the approval of our contract, so we can post the prom. We can see in Chicago this year. This is a joint effort from our business office and our student activities office, so. Both Tony RBS and it's fine. So I'll turn over to you folks.
All right, so we are submitting the contract for this year's prom. It will be at the same venue that it was previously. And you can see in the contract the pricing, which went up just slightly, which due to just everything that's gone up in general. Do you have any questions?
I want to also add, maybe you folks who are listening, but so even new board members, just note this part is that the cost is fully funded by student tickets for prom. This is not coming out of our.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Is there financial aid available for like what happens for students who can't afford it?
There is. There's various avenues that we have throughout the building. You can take care of that.
So the price has gone up, went from 62,400 to 68,000, but we're holding the cost flat.
We are going to hold the cost flat. So when we actually calculated out the price per student, and kind of going back to Dr. Mahanwaj, what she said, so it's 104 is what it will cost each student, but with that extra money, that is what we're able to help pay for other students who are not able to pay for prom. So we were with it. I didn't raise the price because we're still within that threshold. So last year, I think the actual price per student was, I want to say like 98. And then with the extra money, they use that for decorations. We also had to pay for the DJ and little prom like trinkets. This year, we won't have as much wiggle room with that. But I didn't want to raise the price more than $110. I feel like that's already a pretty.
Yeah, and my next question would be is if you've done any surveying of comparable districts to see where their pricing is.
As far as the West Suburban Conference, we are actually very much in the low end. I will tell you that LT, they're going to charge $175 a person this year. So
recruitment opportunity. Move to Oak Park. Pay less for the month.
There you go, there you go.
Huh? I got a marketing. Huh? I can see it on.
Karen, can we work on this, please?
Billboard. I'm thinking billboards, right?
On 290, right there, yeah.
Right. Pretty good. There's a lot that can be.
Right on Grange Road.
All right. Anything else on this? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Next up in finance is the approval of our extension with first student for busing for our students. And Mr. Rodriguez is here. Tony, go ahead.
Sure. This is a 2-year extension renewal. One would be for fiscal year 24, the second for fiscal year 25. The rate increase here varies between 20 and 30%, depending on the route to be increased. It's kind of a good news, bad news contract in the sense that we had a pre-COVID contract before this extension. The market for school transportation has shifted dramatically post-COVID. So we experienced very, very favorable rates for the last 3 years. And now it's we have to get back to market in order to retain our drivers. The combined increase estimates out to just about 27%. But it does keep our cost per hour at about $85. Market is seeing cost per hour for most bids coming in over $100 an hour. So we're still in a good position, but it is a substantial increase in the actual percentage amount that would be charged. Biggest driver for this increase is that pun was not intended to my next statement. It's going to be the cost of drivers that when we bid this out, starting wages for a school transportation driver was around $16 an hour. Now starting is 22. We're seeing upwards of $26 an hour. And that is just where the market, and not just for first student, but for really all busing companies, has gone in order to try to attract new drivers, retain drivers, and make sure that they're able to fully staff our contract in our routes.
I am very much in favor of paying a fair rate to our drivers so we can have safe, reliable, responsible drivers. It seems that that's not an area you want to cheat on, right? And also 22 seems very appropriate.
Other questions? Tony, I have a question. I'm trying to connect the dots between our long-term financial forecast, our projection model, our budget, and these actual expenses. Okay, or recommend, these contracts. So I believe, and correct me with the facts, that this one is within budget. And the budget was 20%. And how, I guess, where in the projection, and I don't recall the 20% in our projections models of what we would do. So how did we get to 20%?
Sure. And in talking with Mr. Imhoff, because I was not here for the last round of projections, but just getting some understanding in terms of the projections. What happens is every year, every department is given the ability to kind of present their budget to the finance department as the full school budget is created. And that is where really the first indication of a larger than projected increase would come in because of the uncertainty in the price of transportation. That is the first time that the 20% was built in was for this year. The reason that this will fit in budget is at the time the the budgeting was done and some of the projections were done, it was, there was some uncertainty on how many different, of our vendors would, see a large increase or not. We used a couple different models to bring kids to school. This is for, the traditional yellow bus, model. We also have some alternative transportation providers that, the kind of is a new model of, an Uber style delivery for, special education. Those routes, because it's a direct service provider, have not gone up as much. So we're seeing, about a 27% increase here, but that's then offset a little bit by the next topic we have is the Zoom contract, which is this kind of model. That's a smaller percentage. Our charter routes here for student will be substantially lower than this amount. And then when we go to the projections in the future, what will happen is this contract will kind of reset the baseline, and then we will have to redo the projections going forward. We'll now know the FY25 estimated increase, and then be able to build the projections off of that. So we'll feel very confident in the FY25 numbers because we'll have both years of the extension done, and then we'll be able to look at the market, analyze it, and say, okay, it's my belief that we'll see, once we have this kind of heavy reset that we've broken up into 2 years, we'll go back to a more usual increase rate, closer to CPI, around 5%, something like that. So that it's again, this is my first go around with our projections, but that was kind of the history of how the projections were done and then why that changed in the budget.
So, I mean, because there's the fluidity, you kind of, you want to update, but then there's also what I call the anchor, right? Because if we're making strategic decisions based on a long-term projection model, and now we're seeing the different economic force that's driving that, we need to be well aware of that. And I don't know, I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces here. So if the increases, and we clearly, we know there's high inflation in this type of arena. I mean, it's evident. The question is it impacting the overall district's budget, or are we finding ways to navigate through it? So, and I don't want to get off into other things. This is about this contract, but when we say it's in budget and it's a 27% increase, and we have projection model assumptions that are 4 and 5%, those data points don't align in my head.
And what I want to add to that, similar thinking about contingencies, because what I will say is the labor market has gone absolutely crazy over the past few years. And particularly when you're looking at wages for the lower end, those wages have seen the quickest growth over the past 3 years than just about any place else. And and I have seen with bus drivers that they're having a severe shortage. It's like dealing with nurses in my population. So organizations are challenged to think about how do you build in for sometimes things that you really can't predict. And I've been doing my for a long time. I've never seen a labor market like this. So it gets to be really challenging. So I would encourage that when you think about projections, to think that you may need to have a contingency for something that just may go a little bit wacky, because that's what's been happening with labor over the past several years.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I'm curious whether, I feel like lower end incomes were stagnant for a long time. And so I would assume this is in some sense a reaction both to the inflation, the rates of high inflation, but also a sort of a correction, right? Like kind of a catch up there. And in which case it would not
keep spiraling up, but I don't know, we didn't know yet.
We don't know, and I say we don't know, because there's also just the availability of labor market, the availability of certain jobs, and I don't know if, for example, for bus drivers, if that labor market is going to expand, as we go into the future, and so if it doesn't, that's going to just cause more competition, which has an impact on where those wages go, so it's something we have to monitor, and be aware of. I believe there has been some catching up, but it was really precipitated by COVID. And the fact that there will be less people available. And so that will continue for certain roles where you're still seeing that challenge.
Yeah, that's very true. This year, there's been some stabilization of the driver market in the sense that what we saw was a lot of drivers did not drive when everybody shut down during COVID. And then when it came time to return to the workforce, many stayed out. They either retired, found new professions. So they had the market as a whole had to attract a new target of people to train, become school bus drivers. Then there was the incentive and sign-on bonuses that for 18 months, it was pretty easy to go work somewhere for 6 to 12 months, go somewhere else, get a sign-on bonus, go somewhere else, get a sign-on bonus. That is starting to slow down, but the other thing we're seeing now is the bidding landscape has been very difficult. Companies are starting to realize they just don't have the staff for the contracts that they have in place, and not all these companies are bidding right now when districts are going out. So there's been districts that have gone out to bid that were just surprised at the low number of bidders that turned out from the historical standpoint.
I guess my question is kind of this, is looking from maybe a little higher level, is and you know, being on the board over the years, this has always been a problematic area, and we know it. And there's been shortages of bus drivers. At some point in time, where it may be advantageous to look at, you know, the feasibility of operating our own fleet. And I was just wondering if you had thought about that, or if you had an idea, you know, at what point do we hit where, okay, it's gonna make more sense for us to run our own buses.
It is something that may make sense in the future. I do have concerns that with Project 2 coming up, just the ability to park the number of buses that we need and where will we keep them with the current fleet that we already have that is in high demand for local transportation runs that we manage ourselves. Today, I do not know what that kind of crossroads is when it makes sense to do it ourselves. And we'd have to do both a kind of a feasibility study of managing and owning our own fleet of buses and what that would cost, as well as in our ability to attract and retain our own drivers.
Right. I had asked a question and it may have been answered, but you know, to me, what would be helpful is we typically get these things as a onesie and a twosie, this contract and this contract, because that's the formality of the vote. But this is really just understanding our transportation need and kind of get to even what Fred says. We're blessed as a district in that really our transportation requirements are pretty low. I mean, compared to other districts, compared to most districts, we have a minimal transportation cost, which unfortunately means we're not really a big fish in terms of you know, that. So it would be helpful, I think, to just see that picture, because you got this one's for this kind of service and this service.
Yep, that can be put together.
Thank you. Okay. With that.
Next up is just the natural next step. It's continuing the transportation conversation. This time with Zoom services for that type of transportation model that Tony mentioned a moment ago.
Yes, and this is a smaller contract here. This is the alternative transportation model that I had mentioned. We have worked with Zoom in the past. and this much smaller extension on this scale. So if there's any questions on this, I'll be happy to answer. One point though that I did want to mention in the first student one that does help with the increases that we're seeing is both the first student contract and Zoom will increase our reimbursement rate when we do our transportation claim at the end of the year. The difficult part of that is that's kind of in arrears. So we complete FY 24, then we do our claim for 24, and that sets our revenue for FY 25. So we will see this increase be offset in the future, but we will not see it immediately in FY 24.
Thanks. Okay, next up is contract extent. Oh, sorry, it is approval for which we'll bring in to board in 2 weeks with American Digital for upgrades to our servers to help support our camera and video, so that Director of Campus Safety Cindy Garrett can track down students who walk out the doors during the school days. So Tony, I don't know if you have any additional information you'd like to add to this one.
No, this is one similar to the laptop purchase that we had made prior, that the dollars were approved for this purchase during the budgeting process, but given the size of the purchase, it's prudent to bring it to the Board of Education for approval.
Any questions?
And last up, this is approval of the school maintenance grant for capital projects for this year. This is an annual grant that we use for the past few years at least.
Yes, and really this is the state of Illinois provides on an ongoing basis $50,000 for continual maintenance or improvements to districts to do non-new construction work. It's what we've done this year is chosen to apply this to our LED lighting upgrade on the 3rd floor. That's been part of our capital improvement plan. The scope of that work was already approved by the board in a prior meeting. So this would just offset $50,000 of that cost. The reason we chose to go with this project is because it is a lighting improvement and energy reduction going to LED. It actually puts us on a higher priority than some of the other projects that other districts may submit. So just that while all round one projects have been funded in prior years, it just puts us a little bit higher on the list in case they were not able to fund all projects.
And really tiny thing here, which
Sure.
sometimes sometimes the language is the board will need to approve the grant application. And sometimes it says the board approves the grant, which makes it sound like we're giving out the grant or the grant is guaranteed. So if it must be consistently grant application throughout. We're kind of a little confused, and so.
Yeah. And just a piece of information too, because I know we have some new board members. It is a requirement in this process for the Board of Education to approve the application of this grant. So we are not allowed to submit our application for the grant until the board has signed off on it.
So, you had mentioned what your intent, where we intend to use it, which is for LED light replacement.
Yes.
And our, some of our peer governmental agencies, specifically the Park District, have repeatedly said, and I'm going to quote, that replacing LED lighting, you can get free money from our utility providers. They will that they replaced it with that. So, you know, I mean, are we using, have we gone to Commonwealth Edison and gotten out of them what we can, where we're getting free money out of them and use our grant elsewhere? And literally they've said that you can do it, and there's the amount of support there is tremendous. Repeatedly they've said that. So
There you comment, don't be put to.
No, not the name of the company, it's their name at the park district. You can see Chris Linger. He is the voice of that.
They do, sorry, I don't know what they do at the school level. We did one at our house and they came out and they like replaced like
I mean,
kind of
it's
light
like-
bulbs with comment that they just handed it to me
I'd rather,
and did it themselves.
Yeah.
I'd rather take that free
Yeah.
money and
We, before our next board meeting, I can investigate. We are in the process right now of verifying the last round of upgrades, with, ComEd. Because when you apply for the grant money, they want to know that it's actually been installed and it's working. So when I have that conversation next, I will, we'll follow up and see. We've, in the grant, we've mentioned too that this would offset, the ceiling and kind of structural work that would come with that as well. I'm not sure if that's applicable to the LED grant through ComEd, but I will find out to make sure. Yeah, so we're maximizing all the $3. Okay.
that's the name of the game. Thank you. Okay,
All right, and last item for the business office at any rate, is the levy timeline. This is, just standard procedure against the board for an overview here.
Yep, just standard information. I chose to use the same format, so the board saw consistency as to the way it was laid out last year. Not listed here, but it is important to note, the CFC next week will be discussing the levy and providing their input as well, much in the same manner that they've done previously. And then we will go through our process as listed. I will stress that please make sure we have a quorum on December 22nd, because we need to approve our levy, and then that Friday we will submit our levy and receive our tax dollars. So otherwise it's pretty straightforward. We just run into a unique timing of Christmas, shutting some offices down, and availability of getting in by that Tuesday deadline. We'll just make sure we get it in Friday and have no concerns.
We need 4 people here in person on December 21st. I'm probably not gonna be. Anyway. we can figure it out.
that's our board meeting.
Yeah.
That's what, because we shifted it because of
Yeah.
December 22nd.
Yeah.
Thursday. Yeah, just.
Or 21st, and then we'll submit it the 22nd.
So,
I have a real quick question.
yes, sir.
About, you said that the CFC is gonna be taking up levy.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
and then will they make a presentation to us, or will they just give a presentation to you and then you'll give us their recommendation or whatever their results of their discussions will be?
So our plan is, we put together our scenarios of some different options for the levy. It'll be discussed at CFC, and then what we will do is take our recommendations and then incorporate that into our tentative levy presentation board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, last in our finance items, shifting away from Mr. Arbogast here, we have our medical insurance renewal recommendations. This is the product, I go along with Mr. Arkin's last question, the product of our insurance committee in-house, and here to present that is Dr. Sanders. So turn it over to you.
Thank you. So as you know, the district is self-insured for medical coverage by its own employees. And the details about how the split is divided between the district and employees is correctly negotiated with faculty senate, our teacher union. And then all employee groups are covered by what is in the faculty senate contract of insurance. However, we have the insurance committee that represents not just faculty senate, but employee representatives from all employee groups. And that insurance committee works to review the recommendations provided by our insurance broker, Alara Group, and it comes out with the recommendations to the board the goal of the committee is always to mitigate the ever increasing costs of healthcare care coverage. So this is what happened this year as well. We actually received recommendation based on actuarial projections to quite significantly increase our insurance budget. The conservative estimate provided by Milliman, the actuarial group used by Alera, was 15%. But because we've been over budget in the past 3 years, we exceeded our budget for health coverage by 2.4 million in the past 3 years. Their conservative recommendation was to increase the current budget by 22%. So you understand this is a very significant increase. So the committee really worked well together to see what are the different options, how we can mitigate this. And so the question is like, why do we see such an increase? So that, first of all, it's happening everywhere. It's not unique to OPRF. But because we're self-insured, it's mainly based on what claims we get. Claims constitute 85% of our medical insurance budget, and they are projected to increase by 24%. We have seen consistent, ever since COVID, we have seen consistent increase of medical claims. This year, we also had an increase of musculoskeletal claims by 66%. So it really depends on who we get on the plan and what our employees and their dependents go to see doctors for, which is very difficult to forecast. But again, the conservative projection was with 22%. We have currently 4 medical plans. We have 2 PPO plans. One is PPO low, which is a more generous plan, was a lower deductible, lower out of pocket. We have PPO high, which again has a little higher out of pocket and deductible, so employees, but higher rates. And then we have 2 HMO plans. So the low hanging fruit for the committee was consolidating the 2 HMO plans. We've seen that one of the HMO plans, HMO Illinois, has lost some of the preferred rates, and we only had 2 people on the plan who would have been affected. So it was really a no-brainer to consolidate the two plans. We would only have HMO Blue Advantage moving forward if the recommendation is accepted. And then the bigger work we had to do was PPO plans. As I mentioned, we have currently 2 PPO plans, and they're a little bit out of balance. Their price, so the actual value between the PPO low and PPO high, it is not what the rates reflect. So the committee came to a conclusion that the best way for us to handle this issue would be to consolidate the 2 PPO plans, and we'll just have one traditional PPO plan and an alternative, a low cost alternative for our employees. We would like to introduce an HSA, health savings account eligible PPO that would also have an employer contribution portion. So what we recommend is based on the industry standard, and that is $500 annually employer contribution for individual coverage and $1,000 for all other levels. So combined, all these efforts allow us to reduce the recommended increase from the aggressive 15 or conservative 22 to 9.23% for all plans. And I just wanted also to mention that over the years we've implemented a number of health care strategies to reduce costs. Back in 2021, we changed the structure of the PPO plan. We went to blue choice options, which has 2 tiers for both PPO low and PPO high. And what it means is that if an employee or their dependent chooses to go to a tier one provider, then they exercise savings goals for themselves and for the district. We also have implemented a working spouse surcharge. What it means is like if there's somebody who was on our plan and they have coverage through their employee, if they choose to stay on our plan, they would have to pay surcharge of $100. On the flip side, we also have a health reimbursement account. So if they move to a different provider where we don't carry the risk of paying for health coverage claims, then they receive reimbursement from the district. So combine all these strategies, and then we also have international pharmacy. We have different programs that target musculoskeletal diseases, high blood pressure. So combine all these programs over the past 2 years, saved the district $2.1 million. So had we not implemented, then the increases would have been higher. So the estimate is it would have been like 68% than it is currently. And at that, I will be happy to take any questions. And Tony's also here if there are any budget questions if you have.
That's super minor question. The mental health claims continue to be one of our top medical cost drivers, and it says right after that MSK claims. I don't know what that means.
MSK, that's
eligibility claims.
Yes.
Okay, so why is that the mental health claims confused? Like musculoskeletal claims is the next line.
Missed.
I'm wondering if that was like a typo or something.
Yeah,
so I guess I'm guessing there was supposed to be something there after the mental health claims that gave us a specific increase number or something like that. So
the specific increase number is in the presentation. So it actually has not increased compared to the last year, but it's still one of the highest. Yes.
Okay, that's all. That was my question.
Thank you for we'll fix it. I don't know how it's.
Other questions?
These things happen.
Fair?
So the increase in costs, what do you think is happening there? Is it just across the board, the cost of services going up, or is it a case where more of our employees are availing themselves of benefits with more complicated medical conditions?
It really is a combination. So healthcare costs are increasing everywhere. So we will actually be trending a little bit lower than the industry overall. But if you look at our prescription costs, then we are higher than the industry average. And also if you look at the number of high claimants, so we currently have 13 high claimants. Out of those, only 2 are eligible at this point for stop loss. So that means that we're incurring this high cost for a lot of them are medication like Humira. That's extremely expensive. And it varies from year to year depending who we have on our plan and what chronic conditions they experience. But a lot of these high costs are connected to maintenance medications for chronic conditions that are very expensive.
So it's both is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And I noticed the appendix of the report did some benchmarking across the state of Illinois and in education, I think. And I know it's not unusual for a school district to self-insure, but do you know how many of our peer districts self-insure?
Not off the top of my head, but I would say the majority. There are some that are in healthcare cooperatives, but
And this might be a question for Mr. Arias based on your experience from prior districts.
I've seen both. I'd say it's a fairly even split to my knowledge. I know actually I was in a different meeting today when a communication group I'm in with a number of other business officials started kind of blowing up with messages and it was on somebody was surprised that their health insurance renewal increase, and our rate increase, while this will not always be true, this year was better than the cooperative, one of the largest cooperative rate increases that was being presented. So that leads me to believe this is not unique to our district, but kind of a more industry-wide issue going on of just seeing costs increase. But we were by far one of the lowest percentage increases. Now we have a plan change that is driving the reduction in that a little bit, but we've seen 15, 18, 17, 22% increases kind of across the board.
Is there a point at which you would recommend reconsidering self-insuring and analyzing being part of the group?
I think that would be a larger conversation we'd all have to have. I know years ago the district was part of a cooperative, and there's definitely pros and cons to being in an insurance cooperative group. So there was a reason that the district chose at that time to self-insure. So we today I couldn't say I could make a recommendation. Yes, we should do A or B.
Okay, I asked just because slide 2 of the consultant's presentation describes a threat as an unsustainable benefit-rich environment that we have, which I think sort of, begs maybe at some point we have to address that, or we should ask just that bigger question.
And then if I may, that's exactly what we're addressing here, and being self-insured for the committee gives recommendation, given that flexibility for plan design change. That if we were part of a larger cooperative, that would have been a lot harder to do, because I think we have to get consent from everybody who's participating.
Yeah, and I definitely, recognize the initiatives that you're suggesting as a way to address it. It's a 3-year trend though, if I read it right. And it identified one of the weaknesses is low wellness plan participation, low utilization cost saving programs. But would it be fair to say that what you're suggesting, change in the PPO structure, is a way to get at some of those things, plus the benefit that's talked about for the spouse that are for the family members?
Yeah, because I meant that we've exercised 2.1 million in savings because of strategies and programs that we introduced previously. So that is like the committee has been willing to work together to come up with these strategies. And yes, we absolutely have some opportunities still for growth. I mentioned prescriptions being one of the high cost drives. So we have program called international pharmacy that is only utilized marginally. So we have a potential to recruit more members who are eligible to switch their medication. But that's education. So that is something that we continue to do, and we also talk to our committee members to do some work on the ground, because sometimes it is easier to hear a recommendation from your peer, and especially from somebody who is utilizing the program now, than when it comes centrally from the dish.
The insurance committee as well, Alera, made it a point of really trying to make sure that as a district, our employees are informed of all of these different measures and savings, and understanding not just that they're available, but what they are, how they work. And I know we've had some initial talks about Alera coming out and making themselves available for employees that have questions. So I think from an education standpoint, that should bring more awareness and then more information as well, clear any confusions that may be out there for employees that just may not be aware what all is there to take advantage of.
And I will just add to it, it's not just initial, we next week actually, on October 19th, we have wellness screening and we have the benefits there. So we will have employees will have an opportunity to have their blood drawn to get the analysis, and also receive flu shots. And then we will have representatives from different vendors, different programs that will have informational tables. So employees will have an opportunity to come up to the table and get information first.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I wanna piggyback on his one too.
Yeah, I
Come back to
I have a few questions. Folks around the committee. Number one, does the committee get into, drill down into the claims experience to see, what actual specific claims there are? Are there any mitigations that we can take? Doing the full analysis with the vendor in terms of our claims.
Yes, and that information is provided actually as part of the presentation. It lists our cause drivers and our hot claims, so it shows what medications are being taken. So not everything that is listed is what I mentioned in medical pharmacy. So we identified, we currently have 48 people who can switch, but that's it. Like some of them are not available through international pharmacy. It has to be a brand name medication that somebody is receiving. It has to be available through that phone.
The other question I have is, so we're moving to 3 plans, 1 HMO, 2 PPOs. One of the PPOs is an HSA qualifying plan.
Correct.
And we're going to provide $500 per individual, $1,000 per family to fund the HSAs. And is that going to be on an annual basis, or is that just initially to get them?
On an annual basis.
Okay. And I guess my question might be is, should we, and this will go obviously back to the broker, that if that is enough incentive to move people from, because when I look at the projections, we're projecting 262 participants, in the traditional BPO, and only 88 in the HSA. So, what can we do to incentivize people to move them to the HSA plan? Because it's a lower cost plan. It's about, I think for individuals, a couple grand a year less in premium. So maybe we should be looking at even more incentive, maybe for the first 2 or 3 years, something like that.
We have talked about it, but this recommendation is based on benchmarking or what is most common in the industry. And I mentioned that we have insurance information in the faculty senate contract, but specifically there will be a memorandum of agreement to change the language because we will have a different plan now, but we are not putting any language about the HSA in the contract, which would allow us to evaluate after the first year if it works right. And we are not discussing any employer contributions in the contract. Again, it will allow us to modify and adjust as needed based on information that we receive after the first year.
Okay, the other thing is, and for years I've advocated us having a wellness program. And I'm very disappointed to see that it's not very well, or there's not a lot of participation in it. It's not highly utilized. And are there some incentives? What can we do to get people to use it? Because wellness programs do have a track record of working. I mean, you can catch people, whether they're pre-diabetic or they're high blood pressure or whatever it might be. All right, and you can work with them on behavioral changes that will mitigate these losses in the long term.
We have discussed it, so one way to do it in the future is to provide an incentive for participating in wellness training. The feedback that I'm getting, some people are not choosing not to participate because they regularly go to see their doctor and they have their blood drawn as part of their annual physical. So they feel like that's doubling, they don't need to do it again. But there's also a way of providing structuring wellness where if you participate in a wellness screening, then there is a difference in premium. That's something that absolutely would be.
In a former employer, we had, I think, 4 different levels of participation, and as you grew into it, you got more incentivized, and it got to the point, our incentive was how much you could have contributions. So if you got to the flattening level, you had zero contribution. You know, now that was, you gave your 10,000 steps in, you're doing everything you have to do. Obviously, I wasn't planning on that, but it did work.
No, I agree with you, it absolutely can work, but we again have to remember this, we have.
No, I know.
correctly
I'm just
negotiated. So it is,
Bring up
it
some
is
ideas.
business cost, and you can only have so many changes in 1 year, so I think you have some very significant changes to the plan.
Yeah, no question about it. No question about it. Thank you. And I think it's a fair plan. All right, moving forward, I think we're moving in a positive direction.
Oh, absolutely, okay.
So I just wanted to know one more thing on the musculoskeletal claims, and the big increase in them, and this is literally only because I was having this conversation yesterday and doing some research into this. And I just want to, I guess, note for everybody that doctors of osteopathic medicine have become more generally accepted in America than they were. And so like, for example, Northwestern used to not hire them, and now they do. They're now up to, I think it was 11% of American doctors have DOs. And that's a degree that is based in musculoskeletal work. And so I guess I would just note that it may not be that there's suddenly a lot more musculoskeletal injuries, et cetera, so on. It's more that more of our staff are seeing doctors whose initial treatment plan is the musculoskeletal plan and then goes elsewhere. So I don't know if that's helpful or anything, but I just think that's sort of maybe going to a different kind of doctor. And that may be part of what's causing that increase, that 6% cost increase, not necessarily an increase, it's a shifting potentially. So anyway, so I thought that was, it is partly driven in the short-term piece. So anyways, just
Tim?
thank you.
This is just a suggestion, Roxana. We're essentially gonna be asking a lot of our employees to change their plan, and that could be really traumatic. So as someone who's been on both sides of that at various employers, I would strongly urge you to find a way to have the faculty senate or other bargaining unit representatives stand with you in rolling out these changes and communicating the reasons why we're making them, to help all of our employees understand how we're doing it.
Definitely. Yeah, so that is a collective effort, and we talked about going and doing presentations specifically like for support staff that they may feel like intimidated. As I remember, I don't know if I'm actually in closed session, but we are planning to open enrollment starts on November 1st. We'll be having open enrollment presentations. All employees are invited, but that happens during the faculty senate meeting. So we also extended an invitation to specific bargaining units. We will come to them and answer any questions that people might have.
I have questions from each of you.
Right.
So, or comments anyway. So first, Roxana, you know, I do appreciate the work of the committee and working through this. You know, some of the data that you shared, that, you know, there have been what I would consider to be some pretty sizable shifts in recent years in terms of, you know, types of coverage that people have taken. So I guess it scares me that with all those changes where we've had people going from family to single and those kind of things, that we've seen the increases we had. So I mean, if we had stayed in the same coverage, where would we be? I mean, it scares the heck out of me. Okay, because the changes are noticeable in terms of what type of coverage people, what box they're in, not even focusing on what we have. So that's point one. The second is, yeah, you're modifying and proposing, you know, new plans that people can move to try to help mitigate this. I think the benchmark data is always been helpful, and it still shows that we still have a very rich offering. Okay, I mean, compared to benchmark, it's not like we've moved from being, we're still, even with this, in terms of what the total out of pocket cost, we're still significantly lower than what the benchmark data says. So there's been a lot of moves, but we're on that side of the spectrum. My concern really is the same thing that I think Fred and Graham said, which is when we've had these discussions in prior years, you know, the best solution is to reduce our claim costs. And how can we reduce our claim costs, which gets to wellness and other efforts? Because unless we can have traction and actually having involvement and buy-in, and you've been preaching this, reducing our claim costs, what it will mean is that we're going to have to continue to redesign the plans, right? And move towards, and that richness that we have will vanish. I mean, that's so I you know, that's the train that I see coming down the track is we need to find out how, and it's not easy stuff, but that's it's either that or it's out of people's pockets. So I didn't really have any questions for you, but for Tony, I have questions.
But do you mind if I just?
Oh, you can answer my non-question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that we are absolutely, I think what happened, like 2 years ago, we introduced a lot of different products at the same time. So there was a lot for employees to digest. So moving forward, our effort is like on continuing education. And absolutely, we talked about mental health. So couple of meetings ago, we brought to the board a proposal for Boone Health that we hope will help us with mental health claims. Likewise, from wellness screenings, the data shows like we have a number of overweight people. So we introduced Wonder weight reduction program that any employee can sign up for. So we're trying, and but it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight. So we are dedicated to continuous education in order to move the needle.
And Dr. Johnson said he and I would share a 6 a.m. daily run. We will take turns. So
I actually thought he said 5 a.m. I've been waiting for you every day.
Okay, Tony. So part of this, as we look at this from the business office standpoint, you know, one of the concerns I have is that we are, you know, we're self-insured, but we also have this fund balance. So I think the transparency on that needs to be elevated, right? I mean, the reality is we've consumed $3 million or close to $3 million of fund balance in the last 2 years funding our healthcare. And now it was money that went into it when, you know, in earlier years, but we have been deficit spending in healthcare, and it's somewhat deceptive, right? I mean, it's there for a cushion, but I do think there needs to be, you know, that kind of was a wake up when I asked what's the change of those numbers, because that's pretty significant, and it kind of it dampens, or it doesn't show the real problems. It's there for a purpose. So I think just we need to be more, you know, when we're talking about this, that's a piece to the puzzle. What's happening to the fund balance? You know, what's happening to our reserve, because we're eating into it, and it's going into healthcare. So $3 million of fund health. It's in our medical account, but it's real, right?
Yes, 100%, yes.
Okay. my question for you is the similar question to transportation, which is, so we have a 9.23% increase. And that is within budget, is what I'm hearing. The assumption in the projection model, I know this one, was 4%. How did we get from 4 to 4 being in a long-term model to 9.2% being under budget?
And again, I apologize, similar answer to, not quite sure what was built into the projection model in prior years. I do know in, talking with, Mr. Imhoff that the budget increase that he put in was at 15% this year. But I don't know where that gets lost between the projection model and the budget itself, and that's something that I will investigate.
Yeah, and I think that's a general question. If we have a projection model that says X, and then we put a budget together and it's grossly different than that, I mean, usually it will mean that the budget will explode and we won't hit it, but something's just not making sense to me here. Of how we would, how we would get to 9.2, whatever, 15% when we had a projection model. I mean, it is different, but without that communication is missing. Okay. That was it.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. It isn't gonna be that long.
Okay.
Because
that is-
but no, I mean, I'm fine with taking 5.
No, I'm okay.
But
It's not gonna be that long.
I'm gonna throttle this one because you're gonna get the nasty Tom. The tired, miserable, cranky Tom. Does anybody want?
Okay. We're gonna be in the.
She doesn't want to answer that.
Okay, so our next order of business is board governance, and the specific action is board goals draft 2. So, we've met, we've kind of gone through these, and the various goals have been revised based on our discussion 3 weeks ago today. And so my aim is for each to communicate anything of significance that was done, but we really want to get to its adoption of a set of goals. We're in October, whatever it is. It's October 12th. So my aim is that we say, are we good with what we have here? Recognizing that we still need Dr. Johnson to, fully opine on what you have. How they integrate, how these integrate, and that there's nothing here that's gonna knock you off your wagon.
I added one question to my.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, Jonathan, I didn't have a chance to run this by you. So it's really just a way to lay out a question on technology. That last one, I have the set of shared protocols for empowering agencies with the use of social media and technology. I realized that it was unclear where this best falls because the work that we were envisioning might be similar to what we already do in terms of responsible alcohol, drugs, sleep hygiene, social emotional learning, just extending it to social media and other tech issues. And so I'm wondering whether it should be under tech, should it be under mental health, should it be cross-listed? So I just wanted to raise that as a question, and I thought it might also be helpful for Dr. Johnson in figuring out who gets assigned to this, because it's maybe not actually a tech thing, right? It might be something that goes with the people who are already doing all of the other. That was my question. I don't need an answer today, but I just wanted to highlight that I'd added something.
You know, and thank you for bringing that up. Without a doubt, this is nothing that our ed tech department would.
Right, exactly. It's not really a tech thing.
It's not, and so our team, once these get kind of really in a spot, we still need to go in and kind of figure out exactly how those type of things fall. So I appreciate you naming that because that's important. And along in that same bucket, I also want, I asked the board to grant our team just a little bit of flexibility as we take a look at the dates of these.
Yes.
We will need to adjust how these fall and where they fall, and maybe even shape some of the outcomes for this year here too. This year too, there's a lot of reference like baseline data, right? And exactly how that gets shaped in the first year is going to take some work on our team. So some flexibility on that front too would be appreciated.
It's made it. Actually, I'll also highlight that AI usage thing, which is currently under tech. I mean, that actually might be Lori's department. I mean, I was like, it's not really a tech question. It's like a faculty question or a.
Right, so I'm gonna start at the beginning.
Okay, well, now I'm done, so.
My mean time is
Yeah,
linear.
that's fine.
Okay, so goal area 1, communication and community engagement. Which is page 2 in the deck, right? I'm sorry, page 3.
Yeah.
I kind of get it. So any discussion with the intent of saying this looks good and we're ready to adopt it, okay? That's we've got objectives, we've got dates, you've got how we do it and what the board and administration role is. So that's pretty clear of what we need.
You know, I would say that the one sort of try to be a bit more specific around the dashboard piece. Is making sure it's inclusive of everything. The dashboards came up in multiple goals. We're having a conversation, so we just want to say that we're thinking this as the inclusive of all dashboards that we may all measures we may want to track, so that we're not having multiple dashboards out there, but we have one that will be inclusive of various board goals.
So there are any questions on this goal? I mean, I think, you know, so this is kind of a big step forward to say, you know, we're going to get a dashboard for our work done, and I'm delighted to see the work that's been done here, and I'm good with it.
I'm gonna go smart grade or date. That we need to understand what the bandwidth of the administration is, what is going on, so, but.
Absolutely.
Recognize that.
Okay. Can I say one thing too, Tom, just from an administrative perspective?
Yeah.
The format on here is something I really appreciate, because board roles versus administrative roles are teased out. So there's a really clear recognition of who's doing what work and how that falls. That's a little harder to do perhaps with some of the other areas, but nonetheless, I really appreciate that. So.
No, I think you've done a great job.
I have one tiny communication note, which is that I think that there's, and I don't know if this falls in here, but there is community confusion about just the committee of the whole versus the board meeting nomenclature. And this came up because D97, I think, is just switched to this format as well. Yeah. Committee of the whole and board meetings. And so there's a lot of people asking, what is committee of the whole and so on. And I'm wondering whether, like, in our transparency efforts, whether we should explain this to people in the title somewhere, right? Like that this is, that like the discussion is happening in the committee of the whole, because I did not know that.
That's how much I had when I do.
Yeah, you're right, yeah. So like, I feel like that should be like a super obvious thing for the community, like they should just know that, so.
Well, it's even that very much, language that's used, for boards, but you're right, not involved if you don't know it, so that's a good point there. And I think whatever we do, we make sure that it is clear.
Well, and there are people who are like logging the board meetings and they don't know to.
Right.
So.
And since Greg likes this format, right? And I was born a grid man. I think we might be able to meet some middle ground on that. No, I think it's good. It's about, I mean, I do want to get to the point, what we do have here are 3 personalities of our goals, because we've been functioning as 3 different groups. And so now we need to depersonalize that. So I will say right now, we're going to say goal 1 is tentatively adopted as presented. Okay. And we, and with the tentative meaning that Dr. Johnson has the, chance to provide any feedback in terms of the dates, just to say you guys are, you guys need to think about this. Okay. So C2.
In addition to our community engagement and outreach, and I think this is close to what we had before. We just want to be clear about what's included with respect to these various. So this is pretty similar to what we shared last time. Any questions here? That's the clarification around who does what.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I think, in addition to Dr. Johnson having to accept the past or provide feedback, right? I mean, these are our goals, but if we're off on, we need to be in concert. The other thing that will need to happen is where it says 2-person board team and where it says board, suggested mechanism and board role. As board president, I'll have to start delegating and assigning and recommending who's going to be doing this. So we'll we'll need to put people names to this. This structure is fine as it is right now. Okay. Okay. I like the pace. Okay. Goal 3.
And then we get to our governance, and kind of board norms and the evaluation. And again, similar to what we have talked about before relative to what we do as a board. The big thing for us to really focus on within this scope of community liaison assignments. There's an opportunity for us there to really just understand, just really step back and revisit what we need to support us, the board, what the various, kind of roles and responsibilities are and purposes of some of these committees that we have, and be able to determine what that right mix is when it comes to this. And this may very well say that requires some sunsetting some things that we've just done for a long time that were valid how we started, but may not serve purposes that we need today. But really being able to start looking at that and planning for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then with our outreach, making sure that we're hearing for all our students.
And so part of this we talked about, which we're doing right now, is then having governance be part of our routine board agenda, right? And so I'm.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so this is page 5 of 7. impact committees, how we work together as student impact committees.
We had it down with there, which is the input we got, Fred, on page 5, the input we got through our session, so page, go to page 6 or 7, we still page 2. The actual book difference.
Okay.
I guess that question, thanks.
Yeah.
You got G1, G2, and G3.
Right, that on our government goal, we were kind of 3 stuff, so.
Yeah.
1, 2, and 3.
Thank you.
We're just trying to capture what we all.
Never mind.
I think they said, you know, this is what you talked about, so you know, you kind of put it in more. Different, better format, so, okay, so that one, the action is. Start assigning folks, Greg review,
Yeah.
Tom assign, and we'll keep moving. And we'll get it all memorialized and, you know, okay.
And one of the broader board discussion, it came up about stakeholder representation, we need to have that on the board, so that the G3.
Yes.
So that would be one that's more full board discussion. That we'll update you.
Yep.
You know, back there on, if we're already down to G3, if we back up to G2. Committee and liaison assignments, I think I made a cut and paste error here because, you know, to determine the right mix of committee and liaison assignments. That's really a group discussion. That's us kind of going through your spreadsheet. So I think I made a mistake in saying, oh, that's a 2-person team. This is one where the king or the king's hat is going to have to lead that discussion. And I'm assuming we would just go through your super most wonderful spreadsheet. And, you know, agree on what we need to be involved with, what we don't. And then, of course, the administration is going to help people with administrator deployments to some of these things.
And maybe there's a little bit of both, there's an element of gathering information, because I still have questions about what some of these committees do, quite frankly. And what the purpose is, and so perhaps an element of gathering information from a smaller sub-team, and then coming for a broader, more fulsome discussion with the board about what that was.
And actually, it would be useful for new board members if there's just like a list of the committees and like what they are, right? Like, you know, like CCP, if you don't know what it is, like how do you actually talk about it?
And going back to whether they support our board goals and support what we're doing still, because some of these committees I understand have been around for a while.
Yeah, so G2, you know, I talk a lot about the president delegating, which is one I feel like the president would want to be a discussion here, because president will be this time.
But I would say really with the starting a recommendation, right? That then can be molded differently. That would be that would, you know, rather than just starting with blank piece of paper.
Yeah, just like they have to talk.
Yeah.
Pre-work,
Okay.
absolutely. Go for it.
Good. All these G2, G3, it's like Gatorade, right?
And you need to refer to them that way. Every task has a.
We have that purpose, maybe like we get each other. So.
That's right. So you're the. We can psychoanalyze each group's work and.
I mean, if you want to share the template, I can revise and plug it into the same template, that would be helpful, right?
I think we should get them to one template.
Yeah, right.
I like this format.
Yeah, so.
And we did this because I think we were rightly challenged, you know, where's the division of labor exist between board and administration, so.
No, it forces it. So, let's go to facilities, which was formerly known as financing. I think initially it was facilities, and then Graham asked, what about finance? And we threw in finance, and then why is finance in there?
I credit Dr. Maharaj for that.
Okay, so anyway. So who wants to speak to this?
Doctors, they laugh.
Yeah. Okay, so we have our our summary statement that D200 effectively manages student-focused, needs-based, and equitable facilities expansion and maintenance programs. You know, that we're in, we basically took out from the combined goal of facilities and finance, we took out those that elements that relate specifically to the facilities. The first one is the dashboard on project 2 and long-term facilities planning. We want to make sure that we have a project timeline and that the dashboard also eliminates the finances as what has been spent, what is committed to spend, what the total committed, and then the future dollars that are expected to be spent. That's hopefully we will have it. And I would imagine this will be a portion of your overall dashboard, right?
Yes.
This will be one of the little nows on your dashboard. And so the second in this, by the time we get here, might be moved, I hope. But track and field project completed on time and on budget by November. Then we have the sustainability plan finalized and incorporated into project 2. So hopefully this month, and I'm not sure if this is an administrative issue of engaging a third-party expert, so that by the end of February of next year, we'll have the overall plan developed. We identify what needs are going to be a part of project 2, and then also in coordination with the CFC, how those sustainability projects of parts of project 2, components of project 2 will be funded. Our final objective would be overall on project 2 that it is delivered on time, on budget, without injury, and then we have probably a part of the dashboard a summarizing a quarterly summarization of reviews from the progress.
Yeah,
that progress I think goes back to objective number 1, which was we want to see the project where we are project timeline wise in terms of construction itself, and the finances is where we stand financially. So
we can take this one and put it in the same thing, and what you'll see, I mean, these ones, this one will be heavily monitored. I mean, this is the role of the board to monitor. These are ready to pick. So, you know, that's the majority of this will fit in that court, right?
Yes, there's nothing on here that isn't already on our.
Correct, yeah.
Great.
right. Then we're gonna.
That makes us happy.
Yeah, this is.
We're gonna put right in that dashboard. And then it's gonna be digital, not analog.
Okay.
Make no promises yet. We have.
So the next goal, finance. And we don't need to read each one because we've already seen this stuff. You know, we've seen this stuff. I've seen it. In my sleep.
You see how this. Sorry, the finance goal, is there something missing at the end of this one? D200 effectively manages equitable financial decision making. You.
Oh, yeah. What's wrong with that? You don't like decision making view?
If we can define what that means ourselves, as an admin team, I love it.
That's
We have to define
that for about 3 hours.
one of the tests is to define what the use is.
Yes.
Okay.
So I don't know what that is, but we should flesh that.
All right. So this one, the only action is to put it in our final form. Okay. Next, school environment. This one, what, Tim?
Right.
I mean, the content, we haven't, there wasn't a lot of change. The main issue here was the collective input of the group to flip and do the assessment before then determining what the committee was based on the group's work. So, you know, the as is before you start putting people and resources to it. Other than that, this one is as presented when we last met. There was not a lot of other input to this, so.
You know what, I do want to say one point, and I think that, Ms. Parker, you referenced this last night at community council, if I'm not mistaken. You talked about the distinction between mental health, mental wellness. And I think, as we don't have to discuss that now necessarily, but there's a shift, there's a difference between those two. Mental health suggests a little bit more of a clinical supervision, implementation, overview as a district. Mental wellness is a little bit more generalist, and you think about the purview, the expertise, capacity of a school district. Mental wellness fits a little bit more closely aligned with our mission and how we move along. So we can bring that back. Don't have to discuss that now, but that might be something we.
I think that's what Graham was recommending at our last meeting.
Oh, did you reference that as well?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was wellness. Yeah.
he said that, and that didn't get picked up, so that's a good graph.
All right.
We listened to you better than him. That's okay. So Lisa, do you have this? Where is this that we have it? Where is it housed? Where's the master?
I have a master.
Can you just change that? Are you on this? Can you change? So that it's done right now. Change health to wellness. That was an oversight. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're back to you, Mary Ann and Jonathan.
I came up with more things to say, but I think the first couple of things on student achievement are in place, and you know, so we're just confirming things we're already doing. Just to explain the third one.
But I mean, can I,
Well,
if they're in place,
Mhm.
then what are we doing?
We're monitoring.
Okay.
Right, yes.
All right, so
yes,
we would just be monitoring.
We're just monitoring, so those are
4 areas.
Yeah.
Well, the first two, so the first two are in place and we're just monitoring, right?
Yeah.
The third one, I just wanted to explain, because you weren't here for the staff wasn't here when we were having all these conversations, right? So I think the idea behind this is, I think we sort of assume that you are, you know, always innovating and looking for how other people are doing it and so on. And it's kind of wanting the board to be prepared to kind of know what are you thinking for the future rather than just what are you doing right now. And it, you know, like I met someone who her job was futurist for the American Red Cross, and she like went to Africa and like looked to see like, okay, in 20 years, what are we going to need to be thinking about? So I think that's sort of like what this kind of thing is, like what legislation might be coming down that's going to change things, what you know, what are you planning a shift to a different modality of teaching or whatever else, and just to keep us informed, I guess.
But for our goals.
So I guess our goal was, so we're asking admin to like, I'd like an innovations and explorations like annual report, maybe like just to keep us in the loop, something like that, and then we would monitor that, like the board would monitor it. Does that make sense to y'all? Am I explaining this in a way that makes sense? I hope. Greg understands.
Are you asking this of my team?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you're asking.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Fiorent says she understands completely, so she's good. Just to be your Dr. Fiorent said, that'd be great. I understand to the extent that I can. There's a difference between understanding what you're describing and then our team figuring out exactly how we're going to operationalize this.
Yeah, I leave that to your good judgment.
And that is something that's of all of the goals that are in here, this is the one that is the most vague for me. And I want to make sure, I want to make sure that what we do and what we present here is. I don't want to, at the risk of, I want to make sure this isn't performative. I want to make sure this is substantive. And so, there could be a difference in intended scope from those who are crafting the goal and the deliverable scope from what our team is going to, be able to realistically do on an annual basis if we understand that we want to make sure that this is functional for our entity. Does that make sense? There are a host of things that we can talk about that are interesting in public education, and that doesn't mean necessarily that these are things that we have a plan for bringing in back into the district on a specific timeline. And so I would imagine you don't want those things that might be of interest to us. Instead, what are the things that we have on an intermediate time plan to bring back to the district in a meaningful way? And so I think that might be where the confusion might exist. Yeah.
I mean, we're not hiring a futurist, okay?
Well, I assume they're doing that already.
Well,
I guess
that's the question. That's what I think we've got to ask, is because if it's a board goal to just put more work on the administration,
I think the board goal.
we've
okay.
got to make sure we're all saying
Maybe
this.
it's my goal, but the goal, another way to say this goal is to make sure that we're not being just reactionary, that we're not like reacting to the crisis of the moment, et cetera, and so on, right? And so, like, as a board member, I'd like to know what administration is thinking we should focus on next, right? Like, rather than, here are all the things we're currently working on. This is, and it doesn't have to be like, pie in the sky, like, here's a random cool idea. Like, as you say, if there's things that you've like delved into a little bit and you're like, here are some things that we're seriously considering, like,
We work with this as an admin team.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about right now could be, we're working, for example, on refining our strategic plan currently right now as an admin. And I don't think it would be hard for us to identify a few areas that are just outside the scope of that strategic plan or our capacity of the plan in the next few years, right? These are things that we know we really want to grow, things that we are doing. And so let us play with this. I think we might be able to harness this in and make it something that gives us a strategic focus rather than an aspirational one. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So I would say then that your team needs to boxify this and put it in the format we have.
I can boxify, but I might need Greg to help me online.
And we'll talk about, I'm just saying in doing so, because then you're gonna, in those box, you're gonna clearly say, what is the board gonna do? And what are we asking the superintendent to do? And I think that will help crystallize that before we fully commit to that.
Yeah.
And the last one here is the support services, the this is actually an admin ask. We don't know if the timeline is reasonable. Kind of leaving that up to you. But we have all these support services, we'd like to see an increase in students utilizing them. And so a report tracking that.
Yeah, the only response I have to this one is that I appreciate in italics at the very end here, baseline measures.
Yeah.
And the word increase presumes a certain status for those baseline measures.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be accurate, right, depending on what we are able to identify. So as long as we our goal here for this school year is to figure out what these metrics might be and present our baseline measure. I think that's fair.
Jonathan, with us still?
Yeah, so I did want to hop in on I wanted to touch on the innovations and explorations, but I totally see why that comes across as a little squishy. But I do see it as a key part of the. I think that all of the goals I've been trying to drive home a point that we should keep consistent among all the goals is looking at how do we bake in abductive processes of reasoning instead of just simply descriptive.
Jonathan, you're sending me to the dictionary. I should know what is abductive.
Well, I mean, so thinking of it, so as in the policy sense, you know, abductive reasoning is you're thinking about what lies ahead based on what you know now, and how can you best anticipate what lies ahead based on the information that we have out there, and how can we therefore you know, strategically maneuver, innovate accordingly. And so, you know, that includes a commitment to best practices across the board. And that means, you know, it means a commitment to instruments of accountability. Part of why we ran off the tracks a little at the end of the last meeting is, and I admit, like, I haven't been the sharpest knife in the drawer in the few weeks prior with being sick and just other stuff. But I think that the point that I've been trying to drive home, as far as when we look at all of our goals, we need to have a consistent way that we communicate each of the goals, as far as having both internal instruments of accountability, such as our equity policy, which has been outstanding, but we also have to have outward facing external instruments as well, and a commitment to those things. So, you know, that this is included in that, you know, in our approach to how can we best be nimble and apply that sort of abductive reasoning to making sure we're doing the very best job that we can possibly do. Is that clear?
No, to an extent, yes. I think we are at a point where I think we need to, like I said, kind of earlier, figure out how we are going to operation. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway,
then we'll know if we're hitting some sort of mark once we make this stuff concrete. It's hard, but I understand the point about you know, wanting to lean forward and make sure that we are trying to explore and pull in what we don't know at the current moment. You know, so I think
yeah, and innovations and explorations, you know, that might involve a board and staff committee, and establishing what the cadence to those committee meetings is. That's what it might you know, materialize as that. I mean, there's clearly we need to flesh that out without question, but I do think that we do need to be very forthright across all of our goals in explaining how we look at both the internal mechanics and a commitment outward as well.
Yeah, there is something real here, and I don't want to, you know, of course I would never want to come across, and our team would not want to come across as not being willing in every and all ways to lean into the right work. But I do want to throw in another caution that is kind of embedded in some of the conversations I've heard around me tonight. And that is, on one hand, we hear board goals talking about taking a look at the committees that we have in place, how they function for the board, and how they serve the district's purpose. And in some of the goals that we have here, there are references to additional committees or ad hoc committees that would involve district administrative and teacher and everybody and engagement. And there's a real negotiation and capacity question in that. Not only it's not a question of what's important or what's good or what could have value. None of that is what we're talking about here. There's a capacity that focuses on the appropriate amount of depth and not just taking advantage of breadth, right? That we might be able to do. And that's really the conversation I think that our team has to have. How big of a bite can we take of these things in what time frame? So I hope that's clear.
Yeah. And again, like, maybe it's not a report, maybe it's like, you know, a board committee has a conversation with you once a year where you just kind of like fill us in on what you were thinking along the years, right? It doesn't have to be a heavy lift.
Yes.
So
I'd recommend a very tangible small bite.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, the concept is great, but we've got a full plate full, and so a small bite. There's a number of different bites. You know, there's legislative trends, right?
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
going on. There's academic trends, et cetera, and there's a lot of ways, and it will not be a significant time save, but can at least get the discipline that is worthy. It's more worth it. Yes, sir.
We do not specifically reference our most important student achievement initiative, that's our freshman curriculum instruction initiative. I think that we should. I think that we should specifically either
So-
a separate bullet point or
Yes.
use those words.
Yeah, we need to monitor.
So we can add that back in. So that was in my, I had it with the pandemic sequelae thing, which we then cut from this page. And then I didn't list it out because we were already doing it, but it should be added back in. So, yes. Agreed.
Okay.
And then tech, I think is really quick. The first two are board monitor. This is what you're already doing. No new work for anybody. But Lori, I just wanted to explain what we're asking for in shared protocol for AI usage. This is just coming out of what I'm seeing at the university is that there's no policy and no consistency, and all the faculty are disagreeing with each other, and it's not fair to the students. So that's you know, and I think it's so in flux right now. Just get the ball rolling on something is what we're asking for, so that the students know what to expect. Faculty is hopefully on a similar page. That would make sense to you.
It absolutely makes sense. I would just, the only thing I would address that I think Dr. Johnson mentioned last time is just the timeline.
No, just change the dates as you think is appropriate. So that's what
Totally understand.
we were guessing. Yeah, and then the last one we already talked about, so.
Okay, so here's our yes, sir.
I mean, this is no criticism of Marianne.
No.
Or Jonathan, you guys did a nice job deciding what was on the board for all of us. I have to say that as a board goal, this whole bucket of technology things, this does not rise to the level of all the rest of the board goals for me. I would be comfortable lopping this off and not including any of these things as board goals. And these are things that we're doing already, but the last one is not an IT thing at all. AI usage is a complicated, really a classroom decision for the administration that I don't know that the board has any involvement in it at all.
And I guess by putting it into the matrix that they have, my guess is when you do this one, board activity will be blank and it will be all administration, which I think supports what you're saying. I think that will force it out. I agree with you. I mean, if we're sitting here, I would say there was the kind of having direction on AI was something, but that's one piece to this, but I don't have a problem lopping it off.
I will say one thing regarding social media might be different in this category. That's a little bit more comprehensive and a little bit modern, but that's a different task for the admin that hadn't really been on this plate in exactly that way. AI, however, is something that we're aware of. This is something that we are actively working at our admin team meeting last Tuesday morning. Dr. Fiorenza brought in some information that she had learned from other districts in Canada, the Chicago Area Curriculum Development Council that you're part of. And so this is constantly, something that we're learning and growing on right now. Regardless of whether the AI piece is a board goal, we're doing this. This is part of what the educational atmosphere is right now, period. I don't know if that helps or hurts.
But then it probably doesn't need to be a board. I mean, that's right. If it's already it's on your radar and you're going to deal with it, then we can just. I don't know that it needs to be a board.
Yeah, lopping it off doesn't mean it disappears. It means that it's somewhere else.
Well, again, I guess my only question about lopping off tech, and I mean, I think the only reason we have tech as a category is like it was in the initial set of
Yeah, it was.
categories, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
so, but you know, like, so the first two board is monitoring. I mean, we monitor a whole bunch of things, like,
Yeah.
so, I mean, the fact that all we're doing is monitoring doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't be paying attention to it. I don't know. And then, you know, like during the pandemic, it mattered that all the students had Wi-Fi access and the school did it, right? But maybe that's something more needed to do, right? Like that, so.
Right.
And then the social media thing, I really don't know if that should be under tech or moved elsewhere.
It's definitely
Yeah.
not in tech.
Yeah, so so I'm happy to move it to school environment or, it's a school environment, if you want to take it over, wherever else it may go instead. I don't know, Jonathan, do you want to chime in on any of this?
I mean, I definitely hear both sides of it. I mean, I guess I'm a little ambivalent about where to go with it. I see the value of keeping technology in the or AI particularly in the foreground, because it is I mean, this is just a profound tectonic shift that we're experiencing right now that we just haven't begun to understand and regulate how it's huge, and I think that I think it definitely merits a place on the mantle for at the board level in the current state of affairs, but I also see the categories, how they're or the subcategories in technology as being a little problematic. So I'm somewhere in the middle, I guess. I do think we need to, at the board level, maintain a very robust, goal-oriented discussion around AI, and not just assume that work is being done at the administrative level.
Jonathan, I don't know, actually. I think that's where we should not be making the decision. We should just be making sure they're making the decision, right? Like, so
It's the monitoring. Do we currently have any kind of update or, kind of progress on what's happening with respect to technology and trends that may be impacting students in school? So is there anything that the administration can provide in terms of things like that? What I do is to the administration and not to the board, but we should understand what's happening.
We could certainly find a way to deliver such a thing. We usually ship it to one-to-one is the most recent example. I think there was probably a several year period where we gave maybe the first 2 or 3 years as a district before the pandemic, we gave a tech.
Yeah, I mean, there have been and consistently technological updates as we've gone through different cycles, when we went to one-to-one, et cetera. So, hey.
And I'm hearing this to be about the update around technology impact as well, right? So we have like technologies where they're kind of, as things are growing, evolving, how's that changing or shifting or impacting how, in terms of the school, the students, and how things are done.
Social technology is actually slated for one of the latter months of one of the earlier months of 24 to present to the board kind of where we are. We absolutely could include where our thinking is with AI, what we have done, but we tabled it because we're for a second tonight. So the regular yearly report.
Okay. I think we originally had that October, actually.
Correct.
So then maybe I just, zero out the tech thing and put on the student achievement thing, instructional technology report, and then monitoring it.
Yeah, monitoring is what our role is.
Okay,
Perfect.
I think that works.
Sounds good.
Okay, so we have, here's the order marching orders. The 18 is done.
Nice work.
because you've created the template that's we will follow, right?
You'll send us.
So, the, I don't know, team, the 3 team, we need to put ours in that box. Okay,
We'll box it up.
we'll do it?
Yes.
I'll take the first crack.
Okay,
All right.
we'll just make sure everybody.
And then you need to get yours in, and today's the 12th of October, okay? This needs to be done in turn by a week from today. Absolutely, no give or take. Because then we have it, Lisa will send them out, and then we will kind of we'll say beautiful, 2 weeks from today. Okay? And do I?
Yes, I was gonna ask Jonathan if he wanted to do it, but. But I'll ask him.
All right, with that said, thank you. Any new business, are we done with this? Is there new business here? Future agenda items.
I think I brought this up last time, but I know I have an interest, I think Tim said here as well, of our board having a discussion about the proposal from the Boston Hand Action Group. Understanding what that is, understanding that the administration has formulated their own view of it yet. That's what I would ask for a board agenda topic.
They'll have a concern about class sizes. I know we've been using a particular model, but I'm not convinced by it. So.
Okay. So, as we said earlier about new agenda items, you put it in, yours, the one you mentioned, I mean, I'm saying it, because we have this safety goal that has a review of as is, so it could fold in there, but regardless, what we need to do is bring these future agenda items back and make sure there's consensus of the board that we want to do it, because it's not what you want, it's not what I want, it's what we want. Good.
So to be clear on that, before we would put something on a board agenda to discuss either one of those, the whole kit and caboodle comes here for discussion.
Yep.
All right, we can put that on an agenda.
Yeah.
For a future count.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do it for that, we can do it in November count.
Our next item of business is adjournment. I'm good.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, you're adjourned. Wait. Oh,
Yes.
There's more. Wait, there's more. You're done. Yeah, dude, that's the beauty of being a template leader. Okay,
Special meeting.
are we ready? Ed? Ed?
Go ahead. Mr. Rowan, go
Okay. Oh, I probably have something on this, right? I call to order the special board meeting of the high school board at 10:01 p.m. on Thursday, the 12th of October in the year 2023 on planet Earth. And ask for a roll call.
Mr. Van Horst.
Here.
Ms. Winsley. Here. Dr. Livingston.
Here.
Dr. Maharaj.
Here.
Mr. Brisbane.
Here.
Mr. Arkin.
Here.
Mr. Kowski.
Here. Public comments.
None.
Action items. I move to approve the personnel recommendation, including new hires, assignment changes, transfers, resignations, retirements, and releases.
Second.
Discussion. Roll call.
Ms. Winsley.
Yes.
Dr. Livingston.
Yes.
Mr. Brisbane.
Yes.
Mr. Arkin.
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Brandhorst.
Yeah.
Mr. Kowski.
Yes, it passes 7-0. Wonderful. I move to approve to ratify. We're ratifying? What the heck is a ratify? No, the purchase. I'm ratifying the purchase of a 2019 Ford Transit Connect vehicle in the amount of $26,245 to be paid for out of budgeted funds.
Second,
Are there any questions?
you need to.
Discussion.
What are we ratifying?
It's the difference in ratifying and approval is approval would be if we were going to go buy this van next week, because similar to the last van we bought, because it's inventory issues. We've had to put a deposit on the van, so now it's a ratification.
Okay, so we're kind of. Thank you.
And it worked.
Wow. Okay, did we vote?
No, I am.
I was so thrilled with you. It's seconded, right? And any discussion? Roll call please.
Ms. Darkin,
Yes.
Ms. Williams Lee,
Yes.
Dr. Livingston,
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
Yes.
Mr. Brownhorse.
Yes.
Mr. Brisbane,
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes. I move to approve the memorandum of agreement regarding insurance between Oak Park and River Forest High School District 200 Board of Education and Faculty Senate, IEA, NEA.
Second,
Questions or discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Livingston,
Yes.
Ms. Williams Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Brisbane,
Yes.
Dr. Maharaj.
yes.
Mr. Brownhorse.
Yes.
Mr. Darkin,
Yes.
Mr. Costa.
Yes. Any future items? I, Tom Kofsky, hereby move to adjourn the special meeting of the Board of Education at 10:05 PM.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?